Welcome to Buddha at the Gas Pump. My name is Rick Archer, and my guest this week is Benjamin Smythe. Welcome, Benjamin.
Hi, Rick.
And Benjamin is a really fun guy. I think I deserve the coffee mug or the T-shirt or even the even the little satchel that you might give out for people who actually listen to all of your YouTube videos, because I've listened to all 78 of them. And if that doesn't deserve a prize, nothing does.
You do. You get a prize.
Okay, good job.
I give out pacifiers.
And yeah, you're a fun guy. I mean, you're sort of a performance artist of non-duality or something, we might say, as people will see when they watch your videos. And I really appreciate your sensitivity and your you're a tender-hearted guy. I've seen you, laugh uncontrollably and break into tears and just go through all sorts of, what I would say are very sensitive fluctuations of emotion that you don't always see and people display publicly. So that's nice. And I also would say you're kind of a gutsy guy. I mean, you've spent countless hours sitting out on the street with a "You're Perfect" sign. And I guess you're known in some parts as the "You're Perfect" guy. And that's kind of cool. So we'll talk about that. One thing I was curious about when we were setting up this interview, at one point you emailed me and said you didn't want to do it, and then you emailed back and said, I want to do it after all. What was going on with that? Were you afraid like I would give you a hard time, or that I had bad breath, or or was it totally unrelated to anything?
It was unrelated. I had this small this period of where I realized I needed to be quiet for a while. And I didn't know how long that was going to be. So I actually canceled all my trips, and it ended up lasting only about 4 or 5 days of not talking. And then I was like, okay, talk again.
Yeah.
And there was something I needed to learn in there. So then I just set everything back up, but it wasn't you,
Okay, I won't take it personally then.
No.
Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not actually out to get you. So.
We can talk about that later, too.
Yeah, well, I can understand the need to be quiet thing, too. I mean, some people have sometimes asked me why I don't teach. And I actually did teach for about 25 years. I was a teacher of meditation, but a lot of the times I was just parroting stuff that I'd been taught to say. And I just kind of reached a point, and I'm still at a point, where I don't want to say anything unless I'm really saying it from my own experience, genuinely. No extrapolation, no speculation, unless I make it clear that I'm speculating. Just kind of, I'd rather sell shoes or something.
Yeah, I met a man, Philip Moffat, who he teaches in the Spirit Rock meditation community, and he said, I was going to teach a yoga class when I was younger, like maybe 23. And I said, I'm a little nervous. And he goes, well, just talk about what you actually know.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay. Well, I
Yeah.
can do that.
Yeah.
Like, don't talk about anything I don't understand, or I haven't experienced myself. So I hear you. That's integrity.
Yeah.
That's important, because it's obviously easy to philosophize all of this.
Yeah, and there are plenty of voices out there that I feel are a lot more articulate than mine. So why should I duplicate their efforts? I'm good at asking questions, so I'm doing this now,
Yeah. Well, the thing I would say is that every time somebody kind of pops up and starts sharing from the groundhog hole of their experience, there's a resonance that just starts spreading out. And sure, you've been in the circle for a long time. You've had lots of experiences, so obviously there's all kinds of people doing all kinds of stuff. But because you know it here, that doesn't mean your neighbor knows about it, or that doesn't mean the guy down the street knows about it, or that doesn't mean, like everybody who shares, if they're doing it authentically from their heart, I would say, is going to touch somebody, and that's very important.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a 5,000, 10,000 crowd pleaser. You don't have to draw a big audience. You could draw 2 people, but those 2 people matter. And so it really, if you have any sense of wanting to share, there's no reason to hesitate. It doesn't have to look humongous.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think that's part of the reason why there are so many teachers these days. It's sort of like a many, just like the internet itself, it's a kind of a many-to-many matrix rather than a one-to-many setup. And it seems to be characteristic of the times, both technologically and spiritually.
Right, and that's the good and the bad side of it, because anybody can do it.
Yeah.
And so then it's kind of wading through, well, wait, where's the authenticity in there? But I think
Yeah.
people can feel that pretty quickly. Something does resonate, whether or not it resonates with everyone.
Yeah, and if nothing else, maybe it's necessary for people to fine-tune their bullshit detectors.
Definitely.
And
Oh,
so there's plenty of opportunity for that.
there's nothing like the internet for that. Holy shit.
It must be true. I saw it on the internet.
Good old Facebook. You wade through all kinds of different sort of arguments within the conversation. You get to the point where like, wow, cool, I'm done with that. I don't want to argue anymore. Where's the love?
Yeah, that's an ironic thing too. You see these guys, getting really nasty about non-duality.
Yeah.
Anybody who says such and such is just full of it. This is the truth.
Well, that's part of it. I mean, in a funny way, that's non-duality.
Yeah, it's
Being grumpy, being a pain in the ass.
Yeah. Well, in that respect, everything is non-duality.
Yeah, yeah. That's the bad news and the good news.
Yeah, yeah.
Nothing's off limits.
So let's get into the Ben story a little bit, just for fun. I've heard it because I listened to all your videos, but please tell it again for those who haven't.
In 2008, after a long time of seeking, in that classic way of sitting zazen and playing with everything I could play with.
Formal teachers and all? I mean,
no. Well, I'd go to retreats, but I never actually worked with anybody particularly. I had a pretty negative experience when I was 19 with a teacher, and I thought, you know what, maybe they're all kind of nuts. So I just sort of sat by myself and then would go in and out of communities. And there's positives and negatives to that. I've gotten to make a lot of mistakes, sort of learn the hard way, but I hit this bottom, I hit this sort of exhaustion. And at the bottom of that, I got out under the stars one night and stepped onto my deck, and from the most honest place in my heart was just whispered, God? And it was like the bottom, God. And nothing happened. And everything answered. And it was a very sort of, it was just, I don't know, it was just like that. Everything answered. This is it. Everything is God. Energy, whatever we want to play philosophically. But it was a felt sense of it, and it just kind of, and it's never really stopped answering. I've had to learn, like many people do, I think, how to play out the momentum of the conditioning from not necessarily the life before, but just from sort of all the beliefs from before. And I've done that in a very messy way out loud on the internet. And that's been very funny, because at this point, like at least where I'm sitting now, I can see that they happen that way, and there are more, I think, mature ways to do that. So at this point, I find myself calming down, even though I have fun, but I don't. There's a lot of it feels very clear to just stay close to the love.
Well, I think you've probably done people a service by displaying your working out of the conditioning, because I think maybe some people erroneously assume that awakening is this clean break, night and day, on and off kind of, transition where you're just like, Mr. Perfect after that. And, I don't think that's happened in the history of humanity. There's always stuff to work out, and even the most advanced or popular teachers that you talk to these days, if they're honest, which the most, I'd say the most mature ones are, they say, yeah, I'm still working stuff out. And they usually say, well, it doesn't grip me like it used to. Even the Sargadatta, someone asked him, do you ever get kind of overshadowed? And he said, yeah, but it only lasts a moment, and then I'm out of it.
Yeah, that definitely feels true from my experience, is that things just don't last as long when they stick. Like, it's very easy to see, like, oh, I'm believing this, or I'm getting caught in this, and then it just sort of drops away. But I find this is an endless learning process. There's no arriving, as far as I can tell. It's just constantly opening and opening and opening, and learning how to be a good person, which is really funny. In the end, I really feel like that's it.
Yeah.
Just learning how to help my neighbors and be a good human being, and get rid of the pomp and get rid of the arrogance and get rid of the I have something, and just be a really good person, which is not an easy task. It's we can all do our best, and our best is really much bigger than we want to admit, and that's the relationship I'm always playing with. How do I do my best when my best is giving you my organs? and yeah, I mean, I want to do my best, but sometimes even my best scares me.
There's a kind of a cool metaphor. I've said it before here, but you might enjoy it, which is used in the sort of Vedic tradition, where, someone who is sort of deeply conditioned and perhaps not awakened might be. It's like making an impression or an experience is like making a line in stone. I mean, it etches in. It lasts a long time. A little bit more freedom, a little bit less conditioning, and it's more like making a line in sand, maybe, and then a line in water, and then a line in air. So you still have the experiences. In fact, you can make a deeper line in water than you can in stone, deeper, richer experience, but it just goes away right away. And so that what you just said about conditioning, it doesn't last. The things it's like water off a duck's back. Just whew, you experience it, it's gone. You don't hang on to it for 20 years.
What I'm finding too is that stuff like new stuff comes.
Yeah.
Like deep, like 1 year old, 2 years old stuff. Like wanting to be held by my father or wanting my mother to listen to me, and that stuff comes out, and it's been very beautiful to be like, oh, okay,
yeah.
Like playing that out as best I can, and not running from it or trying to sort of philosophize it away, but just cry and feel it and really let that out, so that going back to like sitting in the womb, before everything was scary, like, wow, this is going to be great.
Yeah.
And then seemingly having that be very close to the lived experience now. But I think it's just endless learning. There's so much to learn.
Yeah. I just, before we lose it, I just wanted to say that, sometimes in spiritual circles these days, seeking is poo-pooed. It's kind of like dismissed as being waste of time, or something you should drop, or something you shouldn't do, or something like that. But Patanjali, who wrote the Yoga Sutras, actually said that the degree of intensity of the seeker actually, in a way, actually determines the sort of rapidity with which realization occurs. He classified seekers as mild, medium, intense, and vehemently intense. And you often see this. I mean, in your own case, you were a pretty ardent seeker, I would say, from what I've gathered. And that thing when you went out on the back porch and you said, God, it was like, you weren't sort of being ambivalent or wishy-washy. There was an earnest kind of yearning, desire to, like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah, I was as dumb as I could ever have been. I mean, I have never been as humble in my life as in that moment.
Yeah, and that combination of humility and earnestness, sincere desire for realization, or whatever term we want to use, bore fruit.
Yeah, and then what's funny is I find, like, now it's like remembering that humility. That's the it's not difficult, but that's really the key is just keep remembering, like, that place of being right there at the bottom and feeling that, wow, the wonder of there, and then not moving too far from that, because then all of a sudden, and I've done it, you get into the games of it, and there's sort of a social currency to the whole spiritual conversation, and then there's the arguing, and it's just kind of like, what does any of this have to do with that love?
Yeah.
And I'm, learning, like, okay, play, oh, that doesn't feel good, and go back down and play, and so it's just kind of dancing there, but it feels very important to remember, for me to remember that moment of knowing nothing and just reaching out and trying to stay there, and I'm not good at it all the time, because I like to be clever, and I like to play with words, but I do my best.
That's nice. There's a verse, I think it's in the Gita or someplace, where Lord Krishna says, crewing back on myself, I create again and again. And it's kind of reminiscent of what you just said. It's like you just kind of keep coming back, and then expand in creativity and playfulness and activities and so on. But you always keep coming back, to that humble state, as you put it.
Yeah, there's a still point.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it's right here, and so it's that still point where nothing's really moving and happening, and there's not too much.
Yeah.
And then from there seems to be endless creativity and compassion and caring and playfulness and goofiness and just kind of keeping it close to that.
Well, it's kind of the way the universe works. I mean, a physicist would tell you that there's a level of, silence and stillness and whatnot, which on which nothing is happening and nothing has ever happened. It's kind of the ground state of the universe. And at the same time, inherent within that is infinite dynamism and infinite creativity, which then, manifests as this whole incredible, marvelous universe. And we're like little encapsulations of that process, as human beings. We're experiencing the same dynamics within ourselves as the universe itself goes by in its whole process of functioning.
What I love about that is that the universe is saying that.
Yeah, exactly.
Like language itself is alive. Mm-hmm. And this is where the idea of like memes and memetics makes a lot of sense, because the culture and the information is alive. Like we're literally playing catch with it from brain to brain right here, and then we walk away and we have something, we meet somebody else, we say something. So I love thinking of language as an organism that's moving through bodies that are busy trying to stay healthy and alive. Because it seems like, oh, I'm speaking, but then when you get down to it, it's like, well, here's the universe talking and kind of passing more information on to itself, seemingly to open wider and wider to the wow that it is. Because what I love is everything we know everything except for what just happened around the world right now. Like even the physics, even the theories, all of that is spoken from this position that just happened a second ago. Because this is in motion, right? We're aging, we're slowly moving, it's moving in a direction. So it's so beautiful that no matter what I come up with, I'm missing what just happened. I'm missing the information that just happened. I can extrapolate and infer from everything I know, but I can't talk about what's over right now and what just happened.
But that's not a problem, right?
It doesn't feel like a problem at all. In fact, it feels wonderful, because then this part of me that's trying to come up with a conclusion, which doesn't happen as much anymore, it's like, okay, fine, I don't get to know. And then it's more like there's wonder and there's awe. And awe is the most fascinating emotion, because why does awe arise? Like love makes sense because we want to work together, but awe, that just the wow quality of a sunset or a kiss or a really good experience with someone or a place, it's just, I feel like that's the moment when the universe sees itself. It just goes, oh, wow. Even right now, like looking at you, like one of a kind, never before. Like look at you, like wow.
Nobody has a nose like this.
No, oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah, definitely.
They used to call me Pinocchio in the second grade.
Well, it has a nice little, it's a nice little slow. It's great. Great. It's the only nose like that in the world.
Exactly. Yeah. In fact, my father once said to me, "Where did you get that beak?"
Oh yeah. You go from you, brother.
Yeah, right. Well, it didn't look like his nose.
Oh, well, milkman.
Yeah, right. We actually did have a milkman in those days.
Oh, there you go.
I said this last week. I don't want to be too repetitive, but what you just said triggered it. This remembers. I got this little. I'm on Eckhart Tolle's little mass email list that he sends out. This present moment reminder, he calls it. And he sent out one where he said we're ultimately we're not persons. We're focal points through which the universe knows itself. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what you just said. And also, I could take it. I'd like to take it another step and say, the universe is a focal point through which consciousness knows itself, and we are little parts of that massive trillion, faceted focal point. So, we're just sort of consciousness knowing itself and having created a marvelous instrumentality through which it can know itself. This human nervous system is incredible.
Yes, and what I love is that either way, like whether we take one, whichever direction you come at, it looks exactly like this.
Yeah.
It's so simple. It looks exactly like this. It looks like having a conversation with you. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's it. There's nothing more miraculous than the ordinary.
Yeah.
As far as I can tell.
That thing you said a minute ago about whatever we're saying now, we can't really know what happened a minute ago or what just happened.
Well, I don't know what happened a second ago around the globe. I mean, if we're thinking of information as in a living organism, I'm missing information. I have to be honest about that. As long as I make my conclusion, I'm missing information. Or like if I'm coming up with a model of what's going on, well, I'm inside the model. So and this is in motion, so I have to take that into account. But the model maker is also moving as the model is moving. So if I say, oh, it's like this,
right,
I have to be open to the reality that I'm incomplete. In Gödel's kind of incompleteness theorem way, I'm always going to be missing something. So it's so much nicer, I find, to not live with a conclusion and just sort of be open and be open and be open and be open.
Yeah. somehow the image comes to mind of riding a bicycle, where the only way to balance is to keep riding. If you try to stop it and just, okay, I'm going to capture this point here on the street, boom, you're going to fall over. You have to kind of keep going, and you can't use like the balancing that you did a minute ago to take care of what you're doing right now. It's just an ongoing thing.
Yeah, that's the beauty of this is a momentum.
Yeah.
We can kind of go from an awareness perspective, you can kind of argue that nothing's happening, but that's not really practical. So it's more like everything is in motion. Energy is in motion. And aging is such a wonderful, like aging's so sweet. It's so obvious that I'm aging. Like I can come up with all kinds of philosophical perspectives, but the body's moving in one direction. So that's a great kind of grounding point in all of the philosophy. Like, oh yeah, the body's aging. Okay.
It is, but you know what you just said about nothing happening. Don't you sense that as the body ages, at the very same time, there is something which doesn't age,
I can see that, but I feel like that's kind of inferred from memory. Right? If I go, there's one thing here that never moves. If anything, I think spoken in time allows memory to have a little bit more of a say than I think it actually does in the immediacy of the experience. So I hear that as a point, but then I kind of like, even then it's like, I'm not sure, because I have to use my memories to make that point. And where are they now? Where is my memories now?
Yeah, but let's press this point a little bit.
Yeah, let's play. We've been so nice to each other. Come on.
Are we going to get nasty?
No. I don't go nasty. You just wrestle.
Oh, okay. You'd probably whip my... Yeah, you're tougher and younger. Speaking of aging, yeah, you're a lot stronger. Yeah. Just this point of there being, I thought about this actually as I was listening to your videos, because you have your perfect sign, and now you're talking about aging, and there is, it's like it's sort of like simultaneously there are different paradoxical realities that are each true in its own right, although contradictory to the other coexisting realities. So, it's like everything's perfect, okay? On the other hand, the body is aging, and at a certain point you might have a stroke or a heart attack or something which may not seem so perfect. And you can actually take measures to help avert those sorts of things. Eat right, exercise, stuff like that. So everything's perfect doesn't mean just whatever happens. It means you actually do still have volition, to steer the course of life this way and that, or you appear to anyway. Sure. And then at the very same time, there is a level of reality at which it's all unmanifest, transcendent, nothing ever happened, there's nothing is perfect because there's nothing to be perfect or imperfect. And all those things kind of fit nicely together. And it's I think if we look at our experience, it's not just philosophical or hypothetical or theoretical. You can sort of grok that within your experience, can't you?
I think so too. I do think that there's because paradoxes only exist in language. If we shut up and we're not talking to ourselves, there's not a paradox.
Right.
So it's like, in some ways, there's a lot of ways to create these different angles, like a prism, you're kind of turning it and the light changes. But in the immediacy of this, sitting here together, there's not much that's confusing.
No.
And to me, that's always the sweet news. It's like, if I just shut up for a second on the inside, playing with my letters, everything's actually okay. Even if it's not necessarily the greatest, it's okay. And I agree with you that perfection includes the nasty, and it includes the intelligence of taking a Tylenol when you have a headache and fixing your foot when you hurt it, and that's all part of it. And trying
feeding
to clean
the
up
starving people,
exactly,
and all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
of course. And also included in that though is no, fuck that. I'm going to do what I want, because it's like from the position of a separate person, it looks like somebody's making all of these choices, and so it's easy to get into comparing.
Yeah.
But from a sort of like standing on the moon looking at the Earth, it's just energy moving. And so how involved do I want to get into that nitpicking, and how broad can I get and be like, yeah, okay, that's what happens here. I want to focus on the love, or I want to focus on feeding people, as you said, or being kind, and that's what I love about being on the street, is because everybody's there. There's a way that the spiritual circus, as I like to call it, and in a playful way, and sometimes in a derogatory way, there's a way that it can become kind of myopic. Like seeking can become really self-absorbed, so that someone's working on their own awakening, and meanwhile they're passing people who are in some kind of need. And so it seems like balancing that out where it's like, yes, of course I'm looking for the wonder of my experience. And wow, what is this? And at the same time, hopefully, because it really does make a difference, I'm paying attention to my neighbors. And that seems very beneficial.
Very beneficial. I mean, I've seen spiritual groups in which people become so self-absorbed and that they become downright cruel in a way. I mean, there's just, complete sort of focus on one's own concerns and one's own, how one is feeling and so on, to the complete neglect of other people. And interestingly, there are spiritual teachers, like for instance Amma, the hugging saint, who makes a big deal of getting out and helping people. Go out, pick up trash, go out and help build this orphanage or whatever, because it kind of gets you out of that myopia that you referred to.
Yeah, Sandra just told me a great story this morning. She's my partner, and she said that on Facebook they posted this thing where this guy was in a village in Africa, and he put a candy bar over at a tree, and he lined the kids up, and he says, okay, race towards it, and whoever gets it wins. Mm-hmm. They all just held hands and walked together, and picked it up and shared it. And they said, well, we can't just one of us, we have to share it with all of us. And that's really it. To me, that's it. That's everything. That's the only awakening that matters. Is that moment of realizing we are all here together, experiencing the same challenges, the same struggles, the same sufferings. How can we hold hands as best we can and share the resources and alleviate whatever we can of that? And I think it's an ongoing task for the rest of my life, and I will fail at it. But it's not up to just one person. It's up to all of us. But nobody's in charge, too, so it gets into that fun area where it's like, I don't want to live in a world where it's like, you have to help, you son of a bitch. Right. That doesn't work either. So it seems like there's a natural kind of love in our heart kind of moves us that way, some of us.
Yeah. No, I think it's a beautiful point. And if you think about it, I mean, what is awakening or realization? It's not just this little guy here kind of like having some great big wow experience. It's actually an awakening to that which is universal. And how can universal awareness have dawned and yet a person be sort of selfish and narrow-minded and all that? It seems like inevitably there's going to be a greater broad-heartedness or open, a tendency to, I mean, you can't account for personalities, and there are exceptions to every generality.
Sure, of course.
But again, there does seem to be a trend toward people, waking up and then wanting to help others.
Yeah.
In whatever way they choose to do so. I mean.
Sure. That's what it seems like. And it gets into that interesting conversation where does somebody actually wake up? Mm-hmm. Because it's sort of like, awakening does not feel personal at all. Like, it's so obvious that this was how the life was going to happen. It has nothing to do with Benjamin Smythe. And it's not somebody's experience. It's not my experience. The experience belongs to everything. And so that's sort of, even if somebody looks like they wake up and then they're a jackass or they're, whatever, it's like, that's part of it. I mean, we have to let chaos be chaotic in the conversation, otherwise it begins to get really confusing. But wait, it's supposed to, no, it's chaotic. Okay, it's chaotic. Cool. What does my heart want to do? Because to me, admitting it's chaotic ends the philosophy on the upstairs. So now it's like, move out of the haunted house. What does my heart want to do? And that's where all the conversation makes the most sense to me. How do I help somebody? How do I help somebody? How do I help? How do I help? What do you need? How can I help? What do you need? How can I help?
Yeah. Well, that brings up 2 points. One is that there isn't a somebody who wakes up. That's,
right.
Contradiction in terms. And the second, well, I don't know what the second was.
Great. Wasn't it fun when you lose a thought? 'Cause like, where did it go?
Well, it's just kind of what we're saying is like there's that saying in the Bible, my cup runneth over. I think it's in the 23rd Psalm. And once the cup is full, what does it do? What can it do but overflow?
Yeah. It seems that's sort of the benefit I find with the Your Perfect sign is it's not trying to make a broad statement about a personality so much as talk about the honesty of the immediate moment. Like right now, everything's this way, and from there, if I feel it, and there's a softening to it, and this is what people tell me anyway, then they kind of see it in other people, and that feels to be the most beneficial thing, is just sort of passing along the love. But recently I made a sign yesterday because I feel this sort of shift, and I made a sign that says trust, love, and on the other side it says breathe easy. And that feels even more beautiful because it's less of an opinion, and I think it speaks right to the part of us that really feels intuitively that love is very trustable, and that a nice way to deal with that is to just be easy when we are breathing and being with ourselves.
Trust,
So that
love, and
trust, love,
breathe easy.
and it was really fun to see. Like it was such a different thing because I think in some ways the You're Perfect sign was a little bit for me. It was like, hey, see me, and yeah, it's for you too. But like Benjamin Smythe's involved, and this feels like I'm not involved at all, and that feels it feels better personally because it's not personal.
You could have made a sign that said "You're perfecter." Son of perfect.
That's great. I mean, the part of me that likes madness is like, that's fun.
So, are you retiring the "You're perfect" sign?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know, but I don't have one right now.
Yeah.
And there's some, yeah. So we'll see. We'll see. I don't know. You know, I kind of just follow orders, whatever that means.
Let's talk about that because we've alluded to that, but maybe people don't quite realize what we're talking about. So for quite a few years, I guess, you've spent quite a bit of time on the street or sitting in parks or whatever holding this big sign that says "You're perfect." Mm-hmm. So what initially motivated you to do that, and what sorts of interesting encounters have you had while doing that?
In the year 2000, I was in Laguna Beach, California, and I passed by a guy. I was going to a bookstore, and I passed by a homeless man, and he was saying it to people. Mm-hmm. And he could say it in whatever language the person was walking by as. And so I went up to him and I was like, well, why are you doing that? And he said, well, I'm the only person I can't see. Huh. So if I say it to you and you feel it, you show me what I look like. And that's something in there was so beautiful to me. So about 5 years later, I had a really crappy day. I was in San Francisco. And I made a sign and I went out on Lincoln Avenue by Golden Gate Park and I sat down on the median there in between the traffic, and I was just sitting zazen. I wasn't even looking, or it was just resting against me. And then I hear this, excuse me, and this woman is crying. Mm-hmm. She says, thank you, I really needed to see that. And there was something in there that, I thought this would make my day better by giving to others, and it did. It really worked. So I did it a little more, and then I put it away, and then in 2008, when I had this experience, it was like, oh, okay, it really is perfect. It really felt like, oh, it is perfect. I mean, it's a mess, and it's an amazing mess. So then I just started going out more and more. And the greatest moments for me are when people come up and they have those obvious challenges that we see socially, like they have an oxygen tank or they have a limp or, they're missing an eye and they're like, thank you. And it's not personal and it's very beautiful to just kind of like, yeah, well, of course you are. And to share that. And the other thing that's amazing is when children will drive by and you don't even see the kid. You just see in the back seat, there's this hand that shoots out of the window. Uh-huh. It's this little hand, and it waves, and I can't see his face or anything, and it has that moment of just even, touching the little ones. And so it just has that quality where it feels very beautiful. And I love being on the street because it's not pretentious. The street is everybody.
Yeah.
Like the street is everyone, and that feels very important because it's very easy to kind of get into the subculture of satsang and miss out on the fact that everybody who goes to Walmart is part of the conversation, and everyone who goes to the ball game is part of the conversation, and everyone who struggles at their day is part of the conversation. So I like that it keeps this really wide open and keeps me from, I think, becoming full of shit in some ways. But I could be full of shit now, so I don't know. I don't know.
Well, at least you're colon.
Oh yeah, but I had to eat last night. I don't know.
Right. Hot tamales. It's funny about people on the street. People send around these emails and that say it's like the people of Walmart, and it has all these photos of people dressed outlandishly or really overweight and stuff. And I always feel I have a humor list, but I actually don't forward those on because I sort of feel bad about it. It's like you're making fun of people. And it's nice to see actually that there's a growing national awareness against making fun of people for who they are. Lady Gaga's got her campaign going for Born That Way or Born This Way Foundation, and Oprah's really into it. And this new movie just came out called Bully, which is trying to raise awareness of the issue of children bullying each other in school and the suicides that have resulted from that and stuff. And so there seems to be a sort of a dawning appreciation of the need to just kind of appreciate people as they are and not judge them or condemn them for being different or, whatever.
Yeah, I think that it's fun to look at, like, why would I do that anyway? Like, it's great to hear about these campaigns, and I love looking close, like, what really, like, does it even feel good to make fun of somebody? And it's sometimes with friends, we're playful and we joke and we banter, and
Yeah.
humor has its place. There's a place for comedy. But in that really kind of like pointed attacking way, it's just, there's no reason for that. There really is no reason for that, as far as I can see. And I've done it, and I assume at some point in a moment of unconsciousness I'll do it again. But if I can remember, like, there's not a reason to make fun of somebody.
Yeah. The way Amma puts it, it's like having a knife without a handle that's sharp on both ends. You're
Awesome.
stabbing somebody, but you're injuring your hand at the same time.
Awesome, awesome. So beautiful. So beautiful. Yeah, because I mean, why would I make fun of myself?
Yeah.
If I'm the one face I can't see, then all the other faces show me who I am. So why would I make fun of myself? It doesn't make any sense.
And if we're really all the same self ultimately, just expressing itself or being shining through different lenses, then who's making fun of whom?
Right, right.
Huh.
That's where the heart matters, I think. It really matters to live from the heart.
Yeah.
And it's not always, it's not glamorous. Sometimes it's kindness and patience and quietness, and it's not flashy to be kind to people. It's ordinary. A smile goes a long way. And beautifully too, in that mirror neuron way, where the brains are firing whatever they're seeing, and in some kind of percentage. Like a smile. When I smile, some part of you actually smiles on the inside.
Sure.
Underneath the emotion of whatever's going on. And when you do it, the same over here. So how amazing! Walk down the street and just throw smiles at people. Not that they need them, not for any kind of agenda way, but literally because it happens. Like smile, 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 smile.
Yeah.
I was in Sweden and I was holding the sign, and this man came up to me and he was like, "Fuck you, motherfucker! Fuck you, fuck you!" And he was in my face, and he was like, "I want to fucking kill you! I want to fucking kill you!" And I was just like, "Hallelujah, hallelujah."
You were singing?
Hallelujah, hallelujah. And I just kept singing as he was saying that. And at one point he just stopped. And I saw him stop. I saw whatever that was just stop. And he said, "Wow, thank you so much." And I said, "Oh, I love you."
Wow.
And he walked away. And it was like,
Very
it's
cool.
it's that moment of being willing to love in the face of what looks terrifying and find out if it really is terrifying. And obviously there are moments where that's not going to work.
Yeah.
So, but I think we all have the courage and we all have the bravery to see what love can actually do.
That's beautiful. It's kind of like turn the other cheek, as Christ put it,
Yeah, which is fun because my friend in New York, Christy, she's great, and she said, in her tradition, I think it's the Greek Orthodox tradition or the Eastern Orthodox tradition, turn the other cheek means try it again, sucker. So that's a fun take on that. We usually think turn the other cheek as in hit me again,
Right.
but it's more like see if you can get away with that again.
Huh.
And I love that interpretation. It kind of opens the gates because Christ sat down and fashioned a whip. We have to remember that the Prince of Peace, if we're going to play with this metaphor, had a
in
moment
order to go
where
into the money changers and
he sat down and he made a weapon. So let's it's useful in that conversation of Christ being this model to remember that even he has moments of anger and weakness.
Oh yeah, and if it was even weakness, I mean, if we look to the Vedic tradition in the Gita, Arjuna sat down in his chariot and said, "I don't want to fight these guys; these are my relatives." And Krishna, who is supposedly the incarnation of God, said, "No, you have to." So get over it. Realize that I've already killed them in reality, and do your dharma, do your duty. So, I mean, in World War II, we wouldn't have just said, Hitler, well, whatever, we'll just turn the other cheek, and maybe he'll go away. We had to sort of get in there and do something about it.
Well, there's always there's ways to do something about it, I think, that are broader than the kind of either or of I either am in Gandhi's way, like totally passive, or I'm obviously an actual aggressor. And I don't think there's ever a reason for violence. And there's got to be other ways. And I might personally right now in my life, I'm sort of playing with how else can we address the concern of violence? Because human-to-human violence is the saddest problem on earth. Because disease, okay, we got disease, we deal with that. Natural disaster, sure, that we can do our best with those. But the fact that we attack each other, that's so sad. And I know I've done it, and I'm not immune to it myself, but there's something in my experience right now that's just like, is there any way that we can stop doing that? And I think just sharing like this and remembering like, wow, we are connected, and why would I hurt myself? And why would I hurt myself? I don't have hope that, oh, again, eventually it'll all end, but it seems like we really can do stuff. And with information technology now, we can get to each other a lot faster with a lot of our ideas and a lot of our stories that are inspiring. And so it does seem that in some ways that works, but I don't know.
Yeah, I guess it was again Gandhi, whom you just mentioned, I think, who said, "An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, and eventually we'll all be blind and
Yeah,
toothless," I guess. But
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, we can. This is getting off into speculation and opinion, and I'm certainly not advocating violence myself, and
What else is there?
it's not my tendency. But it almost, to play devil's advocate, it almost seems like there are certain circumstances where you sort of have to, stand up to an aggressor in an aggressive way, because he's just not going to go with subtlety. He's just not going to say, okay, you seem like a nice guy, I guess I'll just give up this endeavor and go back to my little country. That some people are just wired as such that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I hear you. I hear you. I mean, I think there's a sword and there's a net. I
Yeah.
think there's a way to have net strategies, which is to isolate it so that it's only left with itself as opposed to destroy it. And doing Vipassana is a beautiful documentary about, meditation within a prison and how the prisoners had a great transformation. They're hugging the guards when they come out. So there are these ways where we can kind of net something and then seemingly love it to the degree that it releases its own aggression. But I know that these are speculative strategies.
Yeah. I hope we haven't bored people with this tangent we've gone off on, but it's kind of interesting to just let it go where it goes and, see what we uncover. Don't want to talk about the same stuff every week. Now let's talk a little bit about. I love this sort of heart orientation thing that you've been talking about. It's like settling down from your head to your heart and tuning into that and acting from there and stuff. Let's talk about that whole thing a little bit more.
The importance to me of love is that it's so obvious that it's necessary.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm out in the world, even now, like kindness resonates. Like enthusiasm, it's like enthusiasm, wow, and it resonates, and kindness has that same resonation. And there are so many kind of old paradigms, not to get too philosophical, but there's so many old strategies that just aren't working anymore. There's more of us, and kindness and being good to each other and being compassionate to each other and helping each other out is going to be such a useful strategy for solving some of the challenges that the sheer number of us is going to create as time goes on. I mean, there's just more and more and more people, and the earth has not necessarily unlimited resources, but it has some limits, and we're going to hit those limits, obviously. And the sharing and the kindness, that story of the kids holding hands, I mean, it really comes down to that. It's like being willing to notice that we're all here together, so maybe I can have a little less. I can simplify my life to have a little less so that when things come my way, I can give them a little more. That's what I find happens here. And not that this is about right or wrong or should or shouldn't, but just what feels the best. If I wake up every day and I go and I do only what I want to do, which I've done before, and I think there's something valuable to that, okay, at some point it's like, okay, well, what else? The next greatest feeling, selfishly, I can find is to share with others and to be kind to others. So I think there's a way that altruism can kind of be forced, like you need to be good to other people, to the point where you don't even learn what you like or how you like to be. So it seems like selfishness is useful, but if selfishness is taken all the way through, it's going to lead to, oh wow, we're all here. And then the best feeling I can find selfishly is to love and to care about other people. And so that feels useful, especially seemingly with the coming challenges of resources, and which may or may not happen. I mean, this is the thing. This is so fun. I can only kind of speculate from what I know, and I don't know everything.
That's an interesting point. It's that old the golden rule: do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. It may seem altruistic, but it actually is self-serving in a way. I mean, when, like we were saying before, with a knife that's sharp on both ends, or if you're mean to somebody, it makes you feel bad. It's like you're the prime beneficiary when you are helping others. It's like that's not maybe your motivation, but
Right.
that's the outcome. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the natural result. It's it's like a teacher. He teaches in a classroom. You've been a teacher in classrooms, and who learns the most? It's actually the teacher who's learning the most. Well, he's teaching. The students are learning, but he's the prime beneficiary.
If he's listening to the students, he's learning a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. There's those moments when teaching where it's like, wow, we're all learning together. You know, like being able to say, I don't know, I'll look that up and I'll get back to you. You know, just like, hey, let's look that up together. There's these great moments where like, and this is something that happens in the spiritual conversation too, where the hierarchy can actually just be like just equalized. You know, we're all here together. The guy in the chair, the girl in the chair, the one who's awakened is equally decaying, equally, you know, experiencing the air as the people sitting below and sort of trying to learn about that experience. And so it seems so important for me to continue to make sure that that equality is emphasized, because anything else just doesn't, it just feels like bullshit, because we're all here together. It does not matter who's had what experience. We're all here together, and that feels very important to say.
Yeah, I agree. It's a both and kind of situation where, like, if I go to see the Chicago Bulls play basketball, in some respect I'm equal to those players, but I'm not an equal basketball player. You know, so
Sure.
You know, the guy in the chair might be more eloquent, better able to articulate, and so on. But what he's attempting to articulate is that which everyone is completely immersed in anyway. You know, maybe he has a little bit more clarity about it, but you know, we're all fish swimming in the same ocean.
Yeah. I see that. You know, it kind of comes down to the setup. I like that you bring up the ball game, because, you know, like within the realm of competition, yes, you're not going to get a jersey. But within the realm of playing together and sort of reducing that need to kind of compete, well, then why can't we all just throw the ball around together and have fun? And so it seems like there's a time and a place for all of that. Competition is a very funny thing, especially when it comes to sports, because everything has to be agreed upon in order for the game to happen. Meaning we cooperate on every single rule, and then we go, okay, I won. Even though we're cooperating the entire time. Yeah. Like if you go out of bounds, you have to, you know, like it's totally made up theater. And then we pretend to compete. And it's a big business, and it, you know, it has its fun. I love watching, you know, right now the Final Four. I think it's on today. You know, it's like, okay, cool. You know, like it's part of the fun, but it's also a little bit of a silliness. This idea that like somebody can actually win something when we're cooperating the entire time. And in some ways that's sort of satsang. Like you don't win enlightenment, you don't win awakening. You know, we're cooperating the entire time. We're agreeing that such a thing is possible. You know, this satsang is it's a setup, because everybody who walks in, it's already decided what this experience is. You know, we're all doing this. Well, it's like, okay, well, what if we just all sit down and hang out together as equals and not talk about satsang and just like share our day? You know, and you hear that sometimes. You know, I notice in the sharings I do that, you know, it's like that dance between group therapy and like community organization, and then seemingly some kind of spiritual conversation. But it really comes down to what are we trying to create here? Because we are all creating it together. You could easily walk into a satsang and just bring checkers. You know, like there's no fucking rules. Like there's no rules. We're really playing and creating this together over and over and over again. So the thing I think that's useful is, am I aware that I'm doing that? Because then when I walk in, maybe I'll walk in without my setups and see, well, what actually is going on? Let's look at this from a different angle. When someone goes into a group and they, you know, seemingly there's somebody who has some kind of experience, or like you said, that eloquence, like, well, how else can I see this? There was this great picture one time. There was a picture of people in an Iranian mental hospital, and then there were a picture of people in a temple praying. And if you put them next to each other, there's no way to tell the difference what they're doing. And I think that's really it. Like, if everybody dressed up if everyone was giving a satsang in a mental hospital and you were videotaping it, is that going to be taken as seriously as if you do it at the Hyatt? You know, like it's the setup of the whole thing that kind of creates the context for what we think is happening. And I think that's very useful to play with, because in that both and way, like, wait, what else could this be? What else could this be? Maybe there's no awakening. Maybe there's just a bunch of theater going on. What else could this be? That seems to be a very useful thing to ask. I've noticed in my life all the time. I'm able to see something a little bit differently when I ask that, because it unpacks the learning and the conditioning and the social ideas of what this is and what is going on. Because if I just believe without playing, then I could easily just be kind of caught up in chasing after somebody else's idea.
Whenever I ponder any of this stuff, like listening to you for the last couple of minutes, I just find my awareness kind of swinging from kind of like a whole range of possibilities, and I find myself accepting what's being said, but kind of being reminded of the infomercials where they say, "But wait, there's more," you know.
Yeah.
Because it's
Well, I
like,
think, yeah, totally.
it's like, okay, yes, this, but also this. And
Yes,
this.
of course,
It's
of course.
like, because it's almost like, you know, that what is it called, that thing in physics where the light thing is not a particle or a wave until the observer observes it, and then it sort of focuses. Schrodinger's experiment. I don't know. One of those guys.
Yes.
But it's almost like when we have to say something about anything, we kind of congeal it down into one of a myriad of possibilities.
Yeah. That's
Just
exactly what I
just
mean.
because of the mechanics of human understanding and speech and so on. And if we can do that and simultaneously, at least in the background, keep an appreciation of the vast myriad of possibilities that we're not expressing at this moment, that's kind of cool.
For sure, and I agree with you. Like, wait, there's more.
Yeah.
And that's just it. It's just, okay, how else can I look at this and play with it? And what's beautiful is that's all, like you were saying, like kind of all about an understanding. Well, what isn't an understanding?
Yeah, I've actually had people accuse me of being wishy-washy because I seem to agree with all my guests, even though they're all saying slightly different things. And they think I'm just being kind of like conciliatory or something like that. Why don't you take a stand? Why don't you sort of, try to change their, but it's like,
Well, we can do that.
No, I wouldn't want to.
Okay, but I'm just saying we could play,
Well, we're all blind men feeling the elephant. It is a wall. It is a trunk. It is a snake. It's all those things, depending on which part you happen to be feeling at the moment.
Well, that's a fun comment because in some ways tension is interesting. We kind of live in a world where, tension, tension keeps us interested. Because if we're just sort of here and we're playful, well, that's sort of everybody's experience is kind of like that sort of bland ordinariness. So it's like, well, let's create some tension. But what's fun is that's what keeps all of the sort of struggles going, is that need for the tension. No, I can't just relax. Because if I relax, it's almost like everything's okay. And if everything's okay, it's almost like I don't exist.
Well, it's the old both and thing again. Tension and relaxation simultaneously. It's like manifestation, specification, concretization, and the simultaneous opposite of all those is the way the universe works. It's like
I don't know how the universe works.
It's specific, it's universal.
Yeah.
It's concrete, it's abstract. It's material, it's non-material. Both at once.
Yeah.
And weird little embodiments of that.
And then sometimes, no, I agree with you. And then sometimes, if we can kind of move away from the words, then there's that sort of immediacy, and you've meditated. There's that immediacy of awareness, or the immediacy of being. It's not a word. It's this. And so that feels like that's what's so great about, as the conversation feels interesting, there's something that's even more interesting. Unfortunately, it's not entertaining. Even though it's amazing, it's such a private thing. And, in an interview, it's called dead air. We're not just going to be quiet together, because that's not necessarily, but we could. But I mean, that's the thing. It's like the conversation that we're having is really about.
Yeah. I did that in the Mariana Kaplan interview that I did a month ago. I made some point. She said, "Let's just be quiet for a minute and let that sink in." And we just kind of sat there for a little while. Obviously, if we did that the whole time, nobody would watch these because they can go do that by themselves.
Well, there's, I want to say, there's something about seeing people being at ease that is interesting to watch. I don't know. I know I get this feedback. There's moments in my videos where there's some quiet, and there are many people who are like, that's the best part. And so that might be true here. There's nothing wrong with silence. I sometimes, the constant need to kind of have the mind be involved, or sort of the language be involved. There's no right or wrong to it, but it is nice when we rest, because that's what we want, right? To rest.
Yeah.
To just be able to relax for a second.
Yeah. And do you find Sorry to violate the point
Oh,
you're making.
no worries.
But,
No, no, no.
but
We can't screw it up.
well, because I'm wired. But do you find that there's a simultaneous in your life in general, not necessarily even right now, but all the time, that there's a simultaneous relaxation and don't want to use the word tension, but in the midst of your most dynamic situations, let's say you're late for a flight, you're running through an airport trying to get to
just happened, yeah.
trying to get to the other gate. And don't you notice that, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that there's a sort of an ease and a relaxation and a silence in the midst of the chaos of the airport and the urgency to catch the connection and so on, that the two can coexist paradoxically.
I don't know, because I think that takes, I mean, yes, I can see that in theory in the moment, the moment's happening like this.
Yeah.
Like, the words are falling out and we're playing. I don't know what I'm going to say next. I don't even know how this is really working. And so can we stop right here and even find that in the immediacy of the experience? I can find it in the after the fact. But in the immediacy, I don't know.
It's not necessarily there. Okay.
And that's the thing where it's like silence is in motion. Silence is having the conversation.
Yeah.
In a poetic way, or the universe is having, or nothing is having a conversation pretending to be everything. Like that's still kind of this philosophical perspective, and that's what it seems like. It's just happening in that way.
Okay.
But when I was in the airport, I was just in the airport, and I was late. I was like, and I was that guy who was like 50 people back, and I was like, I gotta catch a flight. Can I cut in front of all of you? And it was just like, sure. And it's like, okay, thank you. And like, it's great to be that person, hit that sort of social weirdness. It was a little like, uh-oh, well, we'll just play and see what happens.
Do you find that it's almost as though over time you're becoming a kinder person? We've mentioned kindness, but are you like plumbing the depths of deeper and deeper kindness?
Well, I don't know if, yeah, I mean, I think that gets into that, there's always more to learn. But I notice it's easier for me, I don't have much money, and I notice it's easier for me to when it comes my way, to give it to somebody else who really needs it. I had this wonderful conversation with this man on Skype yesterday. I talk with people, and he's like, I'd like to make a donation. And I said, well, whatever amount you're going to give me, just break it up into $5 bills and go out onto the street and give it to somebody who really needs it and look them in the eyes and say, I love you. And that felt like the most amazing way that he could give to me, was just to like go out into the world and learn how wonderful it is to give to other people. There's a reality, I do need money, but right now I have as much as I need, and so it's not a big deal. But
Sweet.
Well, it's important, because the minute I'm making money off of people's suffering and I'm kind of like keeping that going, for me personally, and I know that everyone has a different view on this, but for me personally, I'm absolutely out of integrity. I cannot simultaneously talk about freedom and then not be willing to just kind of like have nothing. Like, what do I know then? What do I know if I'm not willing to give up everything I own and be available to everyone? But this is my perspective, and so I know that it's extreme, but I really...
It is a perspective. I mean, everybody gets paid for their work usually in our society, and some people, I think, get paid way out of proportion with what they're actually contributing, and others way under proportion to what they're actually contributing. Like teachers should get paid a lot more, but nonetheless, if they didn't get paid, they wouldn't be able to do what they're doing in many cases. And in your case, let's say if you didn't have any money whatsoever, you'd probably have to get a job, and then you wouldn't be able to do what you do all day, which is helpful to people, which not that many people are doing. So there's nothing, you shouldn't feel guilty about getting some kind of financial remuneration if it's offered, in the right spirit.
Yeah, I agree. I don't feel any guilt with that, because I ask for money when I need it. But I also notice that, there's so many different ways to share, and having a job and going to a job is one of those ways. Like, it just feels like if the thing I'm focusing the most on is love, rather than some sort of sense of my freedom, then that can happen at the grocery store, that can happen at the, office, that can happen at the Department of Public Works, driving around in a truck. I've had different jobs, and I expect to have a job again. I can't do this. I don't see myself doing this forever, because it's important to stop being this guy and go into the world and be in the world in that way. And then, but right now this is this little window where I seem to do this. And,
yeah,
I don't see myself doing it long term. That's what I love about being on the street is like I can give up all of the stuff that happens on the internet. I can give up the meetings and go have a job, and then every day and for a little bit of time I can go out on the street and do the same thing I do now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like this is about living an ongoing authentic life. It's not really about trying to get away with anything, which sometimes it feels that way. I feel like, wow, really? I feel so lucky. You know, I get to go around the world and talk with people, and it just feels like, you know, I want to make sure that I'm honoring the reality of that fortunate experience, which I try to do, but I think I can always do better.
Do people actually pay your way to go flying here and there to talk to them?
Yeah. I do this thing where I live with people for a week, and so I went to Europe for 2 months, and Australia, New Zealand, and around America, and so they just have to pay for the flight, and then I happily do chores and help out, and you know, it's not just laying in the corner, you know, like I'm just like I try to be involved and just live with them. I love that, you know, like a satsang in some ways, you know, the meetings are their own little thing, but living with each other for an entire week and you know, pooping and shitting and eating and, you know, helping out with the cat and helping out with the kids and like all of the normal realities. I think those things are so important to share together because that's what life actually is. You know, we don't live in a room in a bunch of chairs talking to each other about freedom. We have to go home and clean our garage and take care of our business. So it's like, well, let's live inside the business together. And I feel so honored. Everyone who's ever let me in their house, I just feel so honored all the things I've gotten to learn from them.
That's nice. That's cool. I kind of did that myself for many years when I was teaching. I didn't actually own a home or rent an apartment for a period of about 15 or 20 years. I was just traveling, living out of a suitcase, you know, going here and there.
Did you like it?
Yeah, I loved it. And it was a great phase of my life. It kind of, you just got very emotional saying that, didn't you, Ben?
Oh, man, people are so amazing to me.
It's very sweet.
We're all so amazing. We're just doing our best. Yeah, it's like this is my heart is teaching me all kinds of things right now.
Do you do a spiritual practice of any sort formally anymore, like some kind of Zazen thing, or do you basically just live in life and it's unfolding of its own?
I still sit when I feel it. I don't necessarily have like a schedule, but I definitely notice that I sit down sometimes and just sort of be in that still point.
Yeah, in some of your videos you were sort of saying that it's valuable to sort of spend some time in silence or whatever.
Well, in the end, you know, it's that funny balance between this is about a private experience and it's about a universal experience, as you say. I like that word. And so when I'm there on the cushion, just kind of looking at the wall and being in that place, then that's sort of gathering the energy to then go out and share some of that. I like what Suzuki Roshi says. You know, someone asked him once, he said, so there's nothing we have to do. And he goes, no, and that's why you must sit. And I really love that sort of, okay, there's nothing to do. Let's make the nothing even more and more and more and more so that it's alive with love and it's alive with caring and compassion.
Yeah, there's the analogy of if you want to shoot an arrow, first you have to pull it back on the bow and then let go. You know, you don't just sort of hold it there and let go of it.
Yeah.
And that sort of like deeper silence gives rise to greater sort of the opposite stroke, you know, greater dynamism or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that importance of doing what we feel we have to do, doing what we feel we must do.
Yeah.
Doing the right thing. It comes back to just like, how can I be a good person? You know, I can spend hours in the sort of there's nobody here conversation, and that has its own value and sort of releasing certain patterns from conditioning. But then, okay, cool. How can I be kind? How can I help? How can I share? And I notice I'm just going to, this is the point. If there's any point I want to make, this is the point. To just keep coming back to the honesty and the very practical, pragmatic reality of living together and caring for each other.
That's great. I mean, it's unfortunate, but you know, in some cases, many of the teachers who've banged the drum of nobody here most loudly have ended up, you know, getting caught in circumstances which did not exactly display compassion and caring. You know, there are all kinds of funny things with money and sex and, you know, various difficulties. So I think I think there's a kind of a growing appreciation in the satsang community or the spiritual community that you have to sort of, the nobody here thing can't be a cop-out for not taking care of your humanness and your decency as a person, that there could be a good deal of work yet to be done in that arena.
I think those moments are really wonderful for the communities because it highlights the minute we set someone up in a hierarchical authority position, that it just highlights the sort of the awkwardness and the inefficiency of that. If we stay at equality, then it's like, oh yeah, you had a little adultery or you had a little problem with money. Yeah, okay, that happens here. But when we were like, they know something and I think that sets up this weird imbalance. Because everyone's here together, even the people who make seemingly those errors of judgment or whatever, they're innocent. They're just believing their thoughts like the rest of us. So it's just so sweet that even the gurus and the teachers that have had those experiences, if I take away the belief that they're anything special, well then of course they're just here. They're just like mom and dad and Uncle Steve and like everybody who has their own problems and their own challenges in life. Plato has this great quote. He says, be kind, for everyone you see is fighting a great battle. And that includes the spiritual teacher. They're fighting the battle of fame or admiration or that sort of personal social payoff from being touted as somebody who has something. That's a powerful struggle, and some people handle that very well, and some people handle it in a way that's awkward for them. And so for everyone to remember, no matter who it is, that great battle is always going on, no matter who it is.
Yeah, like you said a while ago, everybody's doing the best they can.
Definitely, including the people. It's that innocence of humanity. We're totally innocent because it's just thoughts. We're just believing thoughts. And at some moments it's like one thought believed leads to a big ass problem like on Wall Street. And another thought believed leads to like feeding somebody a sandwich or making cupcakes for a party or so it's just everyone's doing the same thing, and that's where the hierarchy, it feels very useful to keep pointing out that it's not helpful ultimately for seekers to hold up anyone. Because what really works here is this sense that we're all here together and we're all equal in our humanity, in our suffering. I mean, suffering does bind us in that way. That challenge binds us. Even if someone says they're beyond suffering, it's like, okay, let me watch. Alex Trebek has this great quote where he says, don't tell me what you believe. I'll watch your life and I'll decide for myself. And I think there's something to that, really, like the integrity of that.
Yeah.
Not taking people at their word and just sort of observing them. Because I can say anything, you gotta watch. And that's what I love about living with people for a week. It's like it's pretty hard to be full of shit if you see each other all day.
Yeah, I think it says in the Bible, you shall know them by their fruits.
Yeah.
And then Ram Dass said, if you think you're enlightened, go spend a week with your parents.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. And there's nothing, I don't find any value to thinking I'm enlightened. I don't find any value to thinking anyone's enlightened. There's no reason for that. Just being a good person is enough.
Yeah. Yeah, it's my wife talks about this kind of thing a lot too. She feels very strongly that she like the Alex Trebek quote, she wants to sort of see the proof of the pudding, and not just sort of any sort of self-proclaimed subjective state or anything like that. It needs to be, if it's real in what you're saying, it needs to percolate down into the nitty-gritty, and if it doesn't, then maybe there's some integration yet to be accomplished.
Sure, and I think that opens up kind of like what is it? What is the it? It's like is there something different than just being good people together and kind of dealing with our own battles? Like, does somebody ever have something that is really it? This again is kind of part of the theater, and I know what she's pointing to, I'm sure, but it's still kind of fun. Like, wait, how much of the setup is being taken seriously?
Well, I think there is an it, though. I mean, when you had that experience on the balcony, wherever it was, there was a subjective shift. If someone had been watching you at that moment, nothing would have changed in your circumstances. You're standing on the balcony, the stars are shining, and so on. But somehow your subjective perspective changed, and as you said, it never really shifted back. So, so I mean, somebody like Christ, for instance, to take an extreme example, he wasn't just a cool guy going around raising people from the dead and all. There was something in his subjective development, I mean, enlightenment, or if we want to use that word, it has so much baggage, but if we want to use it, if you could sort of, if the average person, and I'll play devil's advocate with you here, if the average person walked
Which is
down,
all of us.
which is all of us,
The average person is all of us.
If the average guy on the street
Sure.
were to suddenly, somehow, magically pop in to seeing the world as Ramana Maharshi saw it, or as Christ saw it, or something, I think there would be a dramatic contrast. It's like, so I mean, that's what this whole spiritual game is about. It's not just sort of the symptoms in terms of kindness and good feelings, nice behavior and all that. I think, not to demean those, I mean, those are very important, but it's really, the whole thing is about a sort of a subjective development, a shift in our internal realization. Words are difficult to capture it, but would you agree or not?
I agree to the idea of it, and then when it comes down to it, we don't actually know. I don't know what anyone else actually experiences. I can see the outside, I can watch you, and I can see that. But when it comes to this sort of idea of a shift, this is the other thing. Like, I don't find it very useful to believe that at all, because in the end, it's here we are. And I have to do my best. And I can believe that Ramana had something different than the guy at the gas station, or the Dalai Lama is experiencing something different than, the guy on the Bulls team. But I don't know what the value of that is, and I'm still open to exploring it. I hear the point you're making, but I really don't understand the value of comparing other people's experiences, because in the end, this is the one that I'm living with, and everything that I can touch and experience and influence is right here.
Well, it's not to compare for the sake of saying that Ramana Maharshi was better than the guy in the gas station or anything like that. And I think we can talk about this without implying some sort of holier than thou, or superior inferior kind of hierarchy. But the whole history of spirituality, I'm just saying, is not just about sort of good works, and being a nice person and stuff. It's although that's part of it, and in many cases that's referred to both as a symptom of spiritual development and as a technique to facilitate it. If you do good stuff, it helps to culture your make you more worthy or susceptible to spiritual awakening. But there is this sort of subjective component that has traditionally always been part of it, which can be very, very profound, and which and can actually serve the purpose of just what you're saying. It's like we were saying, well, take an example. I mean, a guy who can't swim, if somebody's drowning, he can't help him very much. If he learns to become a good swimmer, then he can become a lifeguard or something. So if there is a profound inner realization, maybe it can have a utilitarian purpose. It can enable a person, that can be contagious. Mm-hmm. And as it spreads contagiously, it's going to enhance the lives of many people, making them better not only in terms of their inner happiness. I mean, I've heard you give whole videos about the happiness is to be found within, not just in terms of external experiences. So enhancing not only that, but also enhancing their ability to, the likelihood of their helping the guy on the street who's having a hard time, or, volunteering at the soup kitchen, or, doing something to on a practical level to benefit humanity.
Yeah. I hear that, and I notice that there's lots of people, and I agree. I just am very skeptical with subjective, reports of experiences. It doesn't help to believe that. I really did. I'm not
saying that.
And I know that's not what you're saying, but I agree that there's something that can happen, and it can have an effect out in the world. Yeah. But I have a feeling that single mothers right now, and elderly people all over the world, and all of that's already happening. Mm-hmm. There are people who are simply just living a good life. Kindly, not believing too much of the noise that they learned from school, society, church. They're all over the world, and then there's this conversation about a special one of those, and I think that's the thing that kind of keeps it from, oh wow, everybody's like this. Everybody has this exact same potential and experience of sharing what matters to them and what they value and what they care about.
Well, the whole name of this show, Buddha at the Gas Pump, implies, that in the most ordinary of circumstances, you're going to encounter so-called awakened people these days.
Yeah, yeah.
And the subtitle of this show is, interviews with ordinary spiritually awakened people. So I'm hip to your whole thing of, what you're trying to say here.
Yeah.
I'm just sort of playing the both and card and saying that you don't have to sort of exclude the significance of the subjective development while emphasizing the value of caring and sharing and helping and all that stuff. The two can go hand in hand, and in fact they complement one another.
Yeah. I see that.
And again, it's not a matter of believing it.
No, I know,
because that's not going to do you any good.
No, that's my point. That's all my point is.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what you believe.
That Ramana Maharshi has having a special experience. It does not do anybody.
It's like looking at a restaurant and saying, I believe and I've heard that they have really good food in there. You could starve to death sitting on the sidewalk doing that,
Yes.
You have to actually eat the food.
Yes.
And so that's what it's all about. I mean, definitely, having the experience yourself, or this whatever, in the restaurant example, or in the case, I mean, Ramana Maharshi didn't want people to believe that he was having some cool experience, level of life. He wanted them to experience it just as he experienced it. Or as Christ said, whatsoever great things I do, even greater things shall you do, So all these guys, if they're genuine and if they have integrity, as we started out this interview talking about, they're not just trying to. I can see why you'd feel this, because religion has, to a great extent, devolved into the whole emphasis is on believing stuff that you don't necessarily experience.
And gathering notes from people you don't actually get to live with.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about Ramana Maharshi. I don't know anything about anyone who's dead. All I know is words about their lives. Mm-hmm. I want to spend time with you. I want to spend time with the people that are alive today. I want to be out in the world with people who I can actually touch and breathe next to and feel. Because everyone who's dead, all they've left behind are pictures and letters, and I don't know how that helps anyone.
Yeah. As somebody said, dead gurus don't kick ass.
They grow flowers, though.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, I think everybody gets the point, and I think we're basically in agreement. It doesn't matter whether we are or not, but
sure. The importance for me is that I can't see the value, and I'm only speaking for myself. I don't see the value in believing that anyone is having a special experience.
No, I don't see the value of that either, any more than, except perhaps in a theoretical way. The way science works. You take a theory, and you don't really believe in the theory. It's just sort of a theory, and you're going to test to see whether it's valid or not. So you do all these experiments, and you see how it turns out. And it may turn out one way, or it might turn out the opposite way. You're not supposed to have a vested interest if you're really a scientist.
Right.
So all this talk of higher states and
enlightenment
states, it's an interesting theory.
Totally.
And if you want to investigate it, fine. Do some experiments, however you choose to do them. And you'll end up finding out whether it's true or not.
Yes, and that's the key. Is I have to actually do the experiments. Yeah. I have to do them. I have to be willing. Whatever it is I'm trying to find, I have to be willing to shut the fuck up and sit down and get quiet and find out if there's anything in here that's really, really scary or terrifying or I have to run from. Mm-hmm. Because I can add letters upon letters upon letters, and in the end, what I really want is to be able to sit in the world as I am without any fear. That's what anybody wants. I mean, it seems like the only thing anybody wants is to be able to actually relax in their life. Mm-hmm. Well, that cannot be found in letters and piles of letters. I can only do that if I get quiet, and I sit still. And I wade through, and it could be terrifying, and it could be scary, and it could be maddening. I wade through all of the beliefs of yesterday that I think are still happening. And then I land here in the chair, and there's no yesterday to be found. There's just this amazing tingling aliveness that I know nothing about. I have to be willing to give up the conversation to find out what's being talked about.
I just got a little warning on my computer. It said, "Warning: there's no volume. There's no your mic might not be working."
Right. Even the computer's scared of silence.
Yeah.
There's nothing to fear.
Yeah. No, that was good. I
No,
mean,
thank you. I appreciate that you gave a little space for that, because it really does. It really is the meat of the whole conversation is the opposite of talking about it.
Yeah, and I think I really understand what you're saying now. I mean, all the talk and all the words and all that is just sort of surface chatter, and its only value, if any, is to point to something, is to point to the real thing, which is far beyond the level of chatter.
Well, it's not really. Yes, I agree. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Language is a wonderful tool that is inefficient for one thing, and that's describing what this is.
Yeah. It's Adyashanti always says, you know, I do the best I can. I know I'm going to fail. I just try my best to fail well.
Yeah.
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 He does a good job failing well.
His notes have been very helpful for me with regards to the body stuff. You know, certain body conditions kind of change because motivations are lost, and you know, I was an athlete, and then I don't care anymore, and so I remember encountering. I was in London at a friend's house, and I just opened one of his books, and there was this page about, you know, just being willing to trust that the body will break down and kind of change in its own accord, and that's the one thing from him that I found like really valuable. I appreciated his notes on that, and that's the beauty of the conversation, like you're saying. You know, it's good to share our notes. Mm-hmm. You know, speculation's a little tricky, but what's actually happening with us feels very useful to share, because everyone has a different thing. I worked with these older men, you know, they were in their 60s, and they're like, well, when you get to be my age, you'll have a colonoscopy, and it'll be like this, you know, and so I feel all prepped.
Yeah. Hey, I'm in my 60s.
Hey, you know, I mean, there's certain things that because of aging is the reality we have to deal with. So there's certain stages of aging that allow us to, hey, you know, this might come to you, and that feels very useful. And in this conversation of looking into the sort of the silent experience of ourselves, some of our notes can be useful, mostly around fear. Fear and what happens with the body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also I think it's, I mean, I get a lot of feedback from people who listen to these interviews, and they say that it really helps them to kind of hear this whole variety of different people's experience, because it enables them not to put people on a pedestal. I mean, you know, I get feedback from people saying, holy mackerel, you know, it's like this is happening to average Joes like me. This is happening to everybody, and I feel so much more optimistic now about my possibilities and about my life.
Yeah. And that's the usefulness of it, is that, you know, the face looks different, or the tone is different, or even the personality expression is different, but what's being talked about is exactly the same. And hilariously, it's available the minute I'm willing to shut up. No matter who I am, it's available the minute I'm willing to just.
Yeah. Cool.
It's not profound, and it's not necessarily entertaining, but it's available constantly for everyone at any moment. It's the opposite of trying to figure out what this is.
Yeah. When you settle down like that, though, you were talking about the body a minute ago. Do you notice that there may be some kind of agitation in the body someplace, some tension in the head, or some kind of turbulence in the heart, or whatever, and that your attention is kind of naturally drawn to that, and it helps to facilitate the dissolving of it?
Mm-hmm, definitely. I had a huge knot in my stomach. It felt like an energetic knot in the middle of the night, whatever that means. Mm-hmm. And I just sort of like, you know, just looking at it without trying to get rid of it or move towards or away, just look at it. And it just sort of, you know, that softens on its own. Mm-hmm. Seemingly like awareness, which we use the word for whatever that attention is. Attention is fascinating. Mm-hmm. it's like it's got love in it. You know, it's almost like permission just to be. And so when I put my awareness on whatever it is, it's just permission for it to be. You know, and I think of the whole idea that I have to improve or fix myself is the obstacle. I don't have to do that. I just have to see what's here. And in seeing what's here, it'll change on its own, because change is the nature. I mean, change is just another word for energy or nothing or the universe. Do you find that with your experience? Like, do you
Absolutely.
find that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a long-time meditation practitioner, and for me, meditation is really it's like a CAT scan, sort of, where you're just kind of going into letting yourself be totally silent, and when you on the screen of that silence, you naturally notice areas that need your loving attention, you know, and the attention has a kind of a healing quality to it, and you know, over the course of an hour or whatever, things just dissolve and get worked out, and you know, there's greater freedom, greater depth that in a way gets stabilized, gets made permanent by having kind of resolved whatever little thing you were carrying around with you for God knows how long.
Right. Only God does know.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah, that is, it's a very useful thing, being silent, as you know. I mean, you know, from your life experience, you know, just if I'm not willing to meditate, and I don't necessarily mean look like the Buddha, just, you know, you could sit on a park bench or relax.
Yeah.
If I'm not willing to be alone and be quiet, it's pretty hard. I can't imagine discovering anything that's worth anything. Because the one thing that's always here, no matter what's going on, is that quiet. It's like the $1 million I'm looking for is buried in my heart.
Yeah.
And it's so amazing. It's like, it's hilarious how much seeking energy goes outwards for what's being looked for being right fucking here.
Right here, yeah. But if it's overlaid with layer after layer after layer of agitation, you know, then it can be obscured. So, you know, this being quiet that you're referring to kind of is an opportunity for the agitation to kind of settle down and to kind of like allow that thing which is right here to be more evident.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
it does alter the physiology too. I mean, we live this through having a body. If we didn't have a body, then we wouldn't be having this conversation, or living anything, or holding signs on the street, or anything else. So it's almost like we're kind of fine tuning our instrument, our living instrument, by doing this.
And the fun way to play with that in words even is, I don't have a body, because watch, the body is talking right here. I mean, the whole thing. The body is another word for the universe. I mean, I don't. It's not that there's a me that has a body. There's the body.
Yeah.
And that's very beautiful. Like, oh wow, there's another little apparent split that I don't have to keep entertaining. I am the body. Fine.
Yep.
Leave it there and see what happens. You know, it's so relaxing, because I had that. This is, you know, there's sort of the mind-body split, the Descartes split. It's like, wait, hold on. What are we really? Where is that? Where is that really if I don't play with the letters?
That's good. I'm glad you added that. Yeah.
It's hard to find. These separations we can do in language are very difficult to find in the immediate experience.
Are you apolitical, or do you find that your strong feelings about kindness and love and caring and all that tend to align you with certain political perspectives or movements like Occupy Wall Street or any of those types of things?
Yeah, well, I think it's useful, yes. There's a sort of pay-it-forward economy that feels useful to begin to kind of talk about, as opposed to the sort of, I have my stuff, you have to, you know, we love each other. So while trading is useful, sharing is also useful. So I notice there's some energy in there in the Occupy way. And then I'm a big fan of rights for all people who enjoy pleasure that is not necessarily heterosexual pleasure. You know, it feels very crazy to me that the Bible still has influences in public policy, because it's not. I mean, that's a book written 2,000 years ago by people who didn't know about the genes, genomes, germs, refrigeration, electricity, airplanes, the internet, sunglasses. The fact that that book continues to inform public policy feels so wrong and unfortunate for us in our world, because there are people every day who are being denied rights because somebody somewhere believes there's an invisible being that wrote a book, and that has to be taken seriously. Those people, I mean, imagine 2,000 years ago, if they knew about airplanes and the internet and modern medicine, is the Bible what they would come up with now? I mean, it's crazy to me. And so anything that denies gay rights, transgender rights, bisexual rights, women's rights, children's rights, minority rights, all of those things, that has to be spoken out against because it's again, it's working towards this equality.
Yeah. Did you ever see that letter to Dr. Laura that circulated around on the internet? It's really hilarious. It's things like, I would like to sell my daughter into slavery as sanctioned in Exodus 21:7. In this day and age, what do you think would be a fair price for her?
Well,
And then
yeah.
there's all kinds of things. I have a neighbor who insists on working on the Sabbath. Exodus 35:2 clearly states he should be put to death. Am I morally obligated to kill him myself?
The metaphor was useful when it was
Yeah.
created as a form, as a tool, not only maybe of illumination, but more likely as control. It is not useful now. We cannot have a president in the United States who doesn't admit that there's an invisible being somewhere that's watching over people. That's crazy to me.
Yeah.
Like, why is that still something that is taken seriously? And I understand it in sort of the softer both and side, where it's like, ideas are a momentum. They latch on. Beliefs are so powerful. How beliefs work in the physiology is almost everything. So I get why it's still happening. But we have to begin to talk out against it. Not necessarily to start wars, but just to be like, look, we're all here together, and that's where the love and the kindness and the equality, even to people who believe the Bible. I'm not against them. I'm against their beliefs. I have to be, because otherwise I'm allowing something that continues to create more and more violence and uncomfortable suffering and discomfort for my friends, for the people I care about in this world who are not heterosexual and who are not necessarily white men.
Yeah. Well, it's like we were saying before about beliefs versus experience. If you hang your hat on a whole set of beliefs which are not necessarily connected with actual nitty-gritty experience in the world, in this world that we live in, then things can get very disjointed and crazy and unfair.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things about spirituality that's a little dangerous is it does kind of create a sort of anything goes mentality. At least it can in the non-duality circles. It's kind of like anything doesn't go. We shouldn't let injustices and violence just we can speak out against that in the most loving, peaceful, throwing a net over it way we can. But it's so important to begin to, or to continue, whoever it is who's listening, like to continue or to begin to, wait, what do I really care about? Because I'm going to have to speak up against it. Because all there are animals with ideas, using force or not on Earth. That's all that's happening, is animals and ideas using force or not.
That thing you just said about in the non-duality community, this I forget the way you phrased it, but what I think it is the confusion of levels fallacy, where there's because on some level things are experienced or understood to be all non-dual, it's sometimes extrapolated from that to assume that therefore we don't have to worry about this problem or concern ourselves with that situation at all, because there really is no one to worry or concern. I mean, there's even some guy who's a well-known non-duality teacher told me that some guy called him up and he said he wanted to have an affair, and he wanted to sort of get a little bit of reassurance ahead of time that there really was no one doing anything, and therefore that sort of would excuse his behavior and assuage his conscience.
Yeah, that happens, and that's a perfect expression of everything. Trying to get information about whether or not it's okay to bone the neighbor, but it's still like in that moment there's a responsibility towards honesty and kindness and mutual self-respect, and I think that's sort of, it's important. Again, it's very easy to all of a sudden become like moralizing and fascist. I'm not speaking in a dictatorial way, but whatever I value, I have to speak up against.
Yeah,
I have to promote. I mean, I have to say, like, look, like, my friends who are gay are not evil. They have every right to exist. They have every right to equal rights. We have to speak out against that, and just to make sure that the voices don't din in the onslaught of ideas. And this is this is what's so beautiful about the world. That's what's happening all over the world. I mean, all over the world are just ideas competing for attention within brains. Yeah. And then the brains live out the behavior of the idea. And so that's where the silence is useful. Like, wait a minute, I want to get the opposite of an idea here for a second. And then can I use the energy of my life to promote love and kindness and what I value in a way that is really efficient? Because it does seem insane to me that certain ideas still run civil rights. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
Here's another one from that Dr. Laura letter. A friend of mine feels that although eating shellfish is an abomination, Leviticus 11:10, it is a lesser abomination than homosexuality. I don't agree. Can you settle this? This whole letter was written to this woman who kind of like, was a very conservative talk show host and was railing against homosexuality and so on. There's a lot of very funny points in it.
Yeah.
But in any case,
it's important. I think it's important for each person who's listening, myself included, to feel into like, what do I really care about here? If there was a world 500 years from now, what would I really want to work hard so that people who experience, just like I do, sadness and joy and suffering and happiness and sharing, and what kind of world do I want to leave for them to encounter?
Yeah.
Because we're all here. I mean, we're all here together, and it's okay that it's okay that people believe different things. And how effective are those beliefs in creating communities that really flourish and work and allow for the variances that happen within the human species? Because this is the world we live in. The Bible is not true. And so we have to begin to live in a world where we acknowledge the reality of what's actually here. Not what we wish was here, but what's really here.
I wouldn't say the Bible is not true.
It's not true. It's not true. It's not an historical account of how the world actually works. I will not bend on this point, and I'm happy to stop, but it's not true. The Bible is not a valid source of what's going on in the universe.
I would say this, that it's a snapshot. It's a perspective.
It's a poetry.
It's
a poorly written. I mean, Shakespeare.
And like anything else, it's not. You can't find a black and white demarcation between truth and falsehood. It's like the yin yang symbol. One side's white, the other side's black, and there's a white dot in the black side and a black spot on the white side. Everything has elements in it of value. Even a pile of manure has tremendous value in its own right.
Violence doesn't have value, Rick.
No, but it's relative. It's relative.
No, but this is where this philosophical conversation gets dangerous. It's not relative. It's not relative. Violence does not have value. Not in our world.
I agree with you and I disagree with you.
I know. It's okay with that, but I'm not gonna back down, because we cannot say in a philosophical way that everything is relative, because that literally affects how we treat each other in this world.
Okay, so we go on a safari in Africa and we see lions committing violence against zebras.
We are not animals.
I thought you said we were animals. We're not animals?
We are not animals in that way, Rick. We have a choice to love. We can choose to love. The modern conversation about no free will is going to turn us into zombies if we're not careful. We have a choice to love. And we wake up every day with that choice. I can either be afraid or I can love. A lion is following its conditioning.
Yeah, and it's doing what's natural, totally natural
totally.
For a lion. And it's not that it hates the zebra.
No,
it just has to eat.
Of course not.
Yeah.
And we're doing what's natural, and what's included in what's natural is the reality that we can choose to love. Mm-hmm. And that's important. It's important to not let that get washed over by philosophy, because that creates the world we live in. That has people passing people every day on the street who need help.
Yeah. No, I really respect you for saying this, and I think you have a very integrated, sort of mature, if we want to call it spirituality, you have a very sort of mature expression of spirituality, because I think spirituality really has to embrace and encompass all the kinds of value things you're talking about here if it's really complete. It can't just be this sort of non-dual, impersonal, flat, detached, thing, or it's not really the whole enchilada.
Yeah.
And but I'm just so kind of like ingrained with the notion that there's always a bit of the yin in the yang, and vice versa. Even so, that I can't sort of categorically state that under no circumstances, under no conditions, ever is violence completely wrong. Because there might be a situation, your sister getting attacked by a rapist or whatever. There might be a situation in which it's appropriate. So,
Well,
as much as we abhor it on a philosophical or heart level or whatever, there might be circumstances in which it's called for.
I think there's always a possibility of a net. I agree that we might have to use force at times, but there's always the net, the isolation of the threat as opposed to the destruction of it is always possible when it comes to human beings.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like that guy in Sweden or Denmark or wherever you were, that could have resulted in an altercation if you had bought into his energy, the guy that was swearing at you and stuff.
Sure.
But instead you overcame that energy with love and it diffused him.
Mm-hmm.
So
I mean,
if we have
Go ahead. There's a Lady Gaga quote that I love. She says, I have to be willing to get kicked in the teeth for love.
Mm.
And I think that's it. It's not about proving anything. Like, look, I'm so willing to get kicked. It's not about that. It's like, if I'm going to quietly live what I value, which is the kindness and compassion that comes from equality and the connection, the amazing connection that this is, then I have to be willing to put my body on the line.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever see the movie Gandhi?
Mm-hmm, of course.
Remember that scene where they're beating the poles? Yeah. They're just coming wave after wave and getting beaten. And that really, well, it helps to prove your point. I mean, Gandhi managed to pull it off against the British in India. Whether it can always apply in every circumstance.
Sure. No, I agree. There's variances and contexts that are wide, but that doesn't mean that I can only aim for what I value.
Yeah.
So my firmness, I think there's something useful to kind of like, we have these ideas that, anger is negative.
Yeah.
It's like there's healthy anger. There's anger that says, I'm going to get a net and throw it over the rapist. Mm-hmm. Because I care about him and the people he's trying to affect.
Yeah.
It's like if I'm just kind all the time in that soft kind of farmer's market way, then I might miss out on the ability to set a nice firm boundary for the sake of everybody. Mm-hmm. I meet these young kids sometimes who are like, oh, the cops suck. It's like, you really want to live in a world without police?
Yeah, right.
The very idea that there's a force out there that is utilized in a way to restrain and to protect is really helpful socially, because certain ideas come along that lead people to commit acts of violence. And so it's just sort of like, it's important to value what we value and to not back down when it comes to love, and to not back down when it comes to equality, and to not back down when it comes to caring about each other, because we're literally creating the world. Mm-hmm. And I can argue away that, eventually the sun will expand and the earth will be inside of it. So, who needs to care about my notes? But all of that is that way that I think that philosophy disconnects us from the reality of our living experience. Mm-hmm. And from the reality that there's more people coming than just me, and that they too have the right to live in a world that is kind and compassionate and caring and open to intelligent, creative exploration. I mean, imagine 2,000 years ago if people had just given up on that shit. Fuck it, it doesn't matter. Imagine non-duality landing like in, 500 AD. Oh, you know what, there's nothing here, who cares? And like, boom, and then nobody works, nobody tries, nobody efforts to create and continue to explore and solve the problems of disease and hunger and food and transportation. And it's like, we're so intelligent as an organism, and then we can philosophize away our responsibility to all of us. And I'm totally guilty of it. And so this whole experience of my heart, myself experiencing my heart, is just showing me how full of shit I've been in certain ways. And I have to call myself on it. Mm. I'm not calling anyone else on it. I'm calling myself on it. My firmness is so that I remember not to get caught in philosophizing away the responsibility I have to my neighbors.
I totally agree. And I'm really glad you're stating it so emphatically. And I think there is too much of it in certain spiritual circles, sometimes non-dual circles. It's like I was saying an hour ago that level 1 doesn't negate level 2 or level 3. That all the levels have their pertinence and their significance, and if you glom onto one to the exclusion of the others, you've got a lopsided spirituality. You can be passionately concerned about the world and doing everything in your power to help it, while at the same time recognizing that everything is perfect just as it is, while at the same time recognizing that there is no world,
I agree with you completely.
On some level.
No, I agree with you completely, because energy and creativity and inspiration comes from all three of those together.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yep.
what's so easy to do is to forget the one where we're responsible for each other.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the only, I mean, that's sort of the emphasis right now. I learned the other two.
Yeah.
There's nothing going on, for sure.
Right.
And it's all one thing. Great. Okay, now how do I care?
Yeah.
That feels so, that's the new lesson for Benjamin, is how do I care? And and it's an ongoing, endless learning process.
Yeah. And from what I can tell from this angle, you seem to be doing a good job of it. I mean, you're out on the street, you're thinking globally but acting locally, touching the lives of a great many people, and through the internet, touching them even a broader, circumference.
Yeah, we'll see, we'll see.
Yeah.
I can only do my best, and like God just says, I love that, I'm going to fail at it.
Yeah.
And that's from living from that place, making an effort, knowing that it doesn't save anyone.
There's this saying about this old man and a boy who were walking on a beach, and the tide was receding, and the beach was covered with starfish that had gotten stranded on the sand. You may have heard this story.
Mm-hmm.
And as they walk along, and every now and then the old man reaches down, picks up a starfish, and throws it in the ocean. And then they keep walking. He reaches down, picks up another one, throws it in the ocean. And the boy says, "What difference can you possibly make? There are millions of them, And at that, the old man reaches down, picks up another one, and throws in the ocean, and said, "Made a difference to that one."
Mm-hmm. That's it.
Yeah.
It's those kids holding hands trying to get that candy bar.
Mm.
It's that. And it's there can be a hopelessness in trying. I really want to, it's like because obviously I can't save anybody. So that's the first thing. I can't save anyone. Because if I try to save people, then there's that overwhelming hopelessness of like, holy shit, there's too many of them. Mm-hmm. So it's first the maturity of like, okay, I can't save anyone. Now, how can I offer some help today? Knowing full well that they're going to die. It's that perfect marriage between nothing and everything. How do I act knowing that ultimately the act doesn't mean anything? But in this moment right here, right now, it means everything. Because that balance, it just leads to kindness. I mean, it leads to a world we love to live in.
That's great.
It just reduces the stresses that come from our beliefs and our ideas about trying to control each other and be safe. We're so safe if we work together. We're not safe from disease and we're not safe from natural disasters, but we're definitely safe from each other if we work together.
Mm. Yeah.
I appreciate you taking, I know I'm being emphatic, and I just appreciate your attention and your listening. I don't mean any aggressive disrespect. I just get very passionate about this point.
Because
it's so easy to overlook. Oh, I know you can, but I know that, there's a way that it's important. I'm not enlightened. I'm not awakened. I just am doing my best to try to be a good person. And that's all that really matters.
Well, basically I agree with everything you're saying, and it's just that whenever there's a little point of apparent disagreement, if we chew on it for a while, and we've done this several times during this interview, it kind of dissolves, and we swallow it. So
yeah, no, I enjoy it. I think I noticed that there's a way that I get emphatic that's slightly uncomfortable for me, so that's what I'm addressing.
Yeah, well, we don't want to be wild-eyed fanatics, but I think we don't want to be colorless saps either.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I think a good deal of zeal and enthusiasm, I think, is a healthy thing. I mean, it's what kind of gets you off your butt and out there doing something.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah, for sure.
So I don't think there's anything wrong with it. And I mean, I get quite incensed about some of the same points we've been discussing and related ones, like I get these emails from people that say, oh, there's no climate change or whatever, because the oil companies are putting out a lot of propaganda money, try to convince people that there's no climate change because they want to make a few bucks, a few ticks on the Dow regardless of what happens to their grandchildren. And I get all steamed up about that sort of thing.
Sure, great. Yeah, I mean, there really are injustices that just kind of come from a selfishness that doesn't include the other selves. Mm-hmm. There's a selfishness that includes the self, and then there's a selfishness. And so I think that it's wonderful to speak out against those injustices.
Yeah.
I don't want to go to war over them, but I want to be able to at least make sure my voice doesn't dim.
Well, going to war over them would be self-defeating.
Definitely.
Uh, and maybe it's wishful thinking, but I do think that that whole mentality that we're kind of speaking about here is on its way out. I really hope so.
Yeah.
But there's signs, and even this sort of global upsurge of awakening people, and kind of the egalitarian nature of it all over the world is, I think, symptomatic perhaps of a darker time, having its day, and the sun is rising.
Yeah. The egalitarian quality happens irregardless of the conversation of awakening, and I think that's the benefit, in some ways, of making sure that the hierarchy in spirituality isn't taken too seriously, because there's people every day all over the world that are not involved in this particular kind of conversation that are definitely promoting this exact same value.
Absolutely.
Because
I mean,
my point being that nobody has to awaken to share love and kindness and equality. It's already right here available to all of us to share at any moment, whether or not
yeah.
we tend to have had a particular experience or not.
Oh, yeah. I mean, after Mother Teresa died, they found her diaries and all, and she was lamenting the fact that she felt like she didn't have any kind of inner experience. She felt like she was a total failure. But here she was, one of the most compassionate people we've seen in our generation.
Yeah, not if you ask Christopher Hitchens, but for the most part.
Who cares?
I'm always fascinated by someone who speaks out so strongly against something that seemingly is very beautiful. So I remember reading some of his notes about that, and I was like, it's useful in that way that Sam Harris speaks out against religion, or it's
Yeah.
very useful to have people who are willing to shout something that, whoa, they said that, and kind of add that to the conversation, just to even just sort of stoke the fires of actually thinking. There's something very useful to actually thinking. And that's the other thing in the spiritual conversation. It's kind of like, you kind of get into that, well, you're going for no thought, or you're going for the silence. It's like, hold on, you have an incredible capacity to reason. It's very useful to use that, because so much of the beauty of our world is created through that process
Yeah.
of sitting together and hashing over ideas and thinking, just like we're doing now.
Yeah.
Like,
Again, it's like we come back to the point of it's the whole package. If you just kind of lock into one component of it and make that the all, then you've got a lopsided situation. But
I agree.
it's
I agree.
always more, the whole package.
Mhm.
And traditionally, that was understood, I think, by many of the great teachers and sages. They didn't just sort of narrow it down to, some particular flavor of experience or non-duality or whatever. They generally, offered a more complete teaching. Again, we're talking about dead people, but there's...
Well, no, but I mean, I
Yeah.
get what you're saying. There's
Yeah.
a value to make sure we include everything,
Yeah, yeah.
all the aspects of our life, cleaning the toilet and voting for the president and caring for the kids, and
Mm-hmm.
all of those
Yeah.
things have to be included in my...
Yep. Well, I think we've beat that point to death.
Totally.
Yeah,
What else?
in a non-violent way, of course.
Sure. Oh, yes. we feather fluffed it to death.
Yeah, that's right. Tickled it to death.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. I appreciate talking to you. It's really
Yeah, this is great.
Thank
All
you
right.
so much. Yeah.
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 It's funny, because when I listened to all your videos and stuff, I was thinking, well, am I going to be in danger of getting too intellectual with Ben? I mean, he just seems to be such a down-to-earth kind of guy, and I tend to get off in my thoughts and theories and so on and so forth. But I think we've really found a nice balance here, and you're anybody's match on the intellectual level as well as the heart level and everything else. I really appreciate your kind of integrated development and perspective.
Yeah, I'm still learning it.
Oh yeah, aren't we all?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. We're works in progress.
It's fun to play. In the video, I think of the video sometimes, like you said, performance art. Like, there's a seriousness within the conversation that I like to try to soften, but then there's also moments where it's useful to be serious. So the videos have been a very fun way to play with, just think about it like taking different angles on different ideas. And And I
Well,
appreciate, I appreciate being able to share it. It's a very funny thing.
yeah. One thing I meant to ask you, I didn't actually watch the videos. I do this thing where I have this software that I can go to a YouTube page and download in one stroke all the videos, convert them to audio, and then bring them into iTunes, within a few minutes, and then put them on my iPod, and then I'm listening while I'm riding my bike or cutting the grass.
Oh, cool.
Stuff like that. And so a lot of times I heard you doing this thing, which to me sounded like kind of like Kundalini explosions or something. It's like you were kind of like is that what it was? I mean, were you kind of having a Kundalini episode or something?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was just curious because I couldn't tell from the audio.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's a little beatboxing in there, but then there's the Kundalini.
Yeah, the beatboxing was good too. I thought that was pretty cool. You could actually, get up on a stage someplace and do some of that. It'd be fun.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. It hasn't happened yet, but I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
I might be shy when it comes to actual reality. I don't know.
Yeah.
Videos, it's so safe. Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, I can't say that. I don't know until I stand up there.
Yeah, you don't strike me as being a terribly shy person.
I think I am sometimes.
Yeah, well, eat powder milk biscuits.
What's that from? I feel like I just saw a sign, but I don't know what it is.
Garrison Keillor, he on Prairie Home Companion, he does these ads for like the Ketchup Advisory Council and powder milk biscuits. They give shy people the courage to get up and do what needs to be done.
Awesome. I'll have some in a bag before I...
All righty. Well, let's wrap it up. So this has been great fun, Ben.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Now, before you hang up on me, I just want to make some concluding remarks for those listening.
Okay.
I've been speaking with Benjamin Smythe. Do you have a website?
I do. It's www.benjamintSmythe.com.
Okay, good. And I'll be linking to that from batgap.com, as I always do with my guests. You haven't written any books, I don't suppose.
No.
Okay, no problem. But anyway, I'll link to your website and maybe also to your YouTube page, or you probably link to that from your website. Mm-hmm. And so people can watch some of these videos that I've been talking about. For those who might be new to this program, I do one every week. I think this might be number 117 or something. And I got new ones coming up every week. So if you have enjoyed this, you might like to tune into some of the others. You can do that either in video, and you can have yourself be reminded by subscribing to the YouTube channel or going to batgap.com and signing up for an email reminder. There's also a podcast there that you can sign up for so that you can listen just to the audio on your iPod or whatever. And there's a discussion group that pops up around every interview, and which sometimes gets very lively. There's also a Yahoo chat group that you'll find a link to from there. So there's all kinds of possibilities. So check it out, and thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and we will see you next week.
Cool. Have a good day.
Thanks, Ben.
Bye. Have a good day. Thank you.